Hi, everyone. This is Genevieve from the International Center for Research on Women. Thank you so much for joining us today for our GenderSmart Investing Resource Hub webinar. We're doing a live demo of the Resource Hub today. So it's wonderful to have all of you with us. I am here with my colleague, Allie.
Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm a Gender and Evaluation Specialist at ICRW and excited to be sharing this resource.
Great. And again, this is Genevieve. I am a manager within the advisory practice of ICRW that applies ICRW's 40+ years of research and expertise around what works to empower women and girls to working with organizations and companies primarily. So yes, we're really excited to have launched our GenderSmart Investing Resource Hub. Today, the purpose of this webinar today is to walk through a bit of background on the Resource Hub, explain a bit around how it was created, and then we're going to, and the purpose of it, and then we're going to go into a live demo that Allie will walk us through before ending with some concluding points and opening it up for questions. We'll have about 25 minutes for questions at the end of the call today and really look forward to receiving those from you all. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So just as a brief background, what is GenderSmart Investing? GenderSmart Investing is the use of capital to simultaneously generate financial returns and advance gender equality. So really around applying a gender lens with gender analysis with financial analysis to see things that you might have otherwise missed. And the research is making it more clear that integrating gender insights into investment processes is just smart investing, which is why we are attracted to the term gender smart investing in particular. And with a variation by sector and by context, gender affects business and business affects gender, both within and outside the company. Within the past year, the attention towards gender smart investing has increased substantially. It's a field that's been growing quite rapidly. And as more attention has grown in the field, the question is less so about whether to integrate gender into financial analysis and into investment processes, and more about how to integrate gender into investment processes. And that's where this resource hub really comes into play. So what exactly is the GenderSmart Investing Resource Hub? The purpose of this hub is helping investors to better integrate gender into investment processes with the end goals of first enhancing financial returns alongside gender equality and women's empowerment. So this tool, which is sector specific, helps investors to screen potential investments or conduct due diligence using a gender lens, and can also inform for investors that have a portfolio of companies. They can use it with their portfolio of companies to help inform different types of gender-related technical assistance. And we'll walk through exactly how that tool will enable you to do that. The 4 sectors that are available on the hub to date are agriculture, off-grid energy, power infrastructure, and healthcare. So the hub was developed with funding from DFID, the Department for International Development of the UK, and also with support from CDC Group, which is the Development Finance Institution of the UK, for those that are not familiar. And we at ICRW kind of applied our background, expertise, and knowledge that we've done in kind of working in these various sectors, and also conducted interviews with various investors, primarily impact investors and development finance institutions, as well as leading gender lens investing experts. We also conducted 2 prototyping sessions, one held at SOCAP in California and the other held at the GenderSmart Investing Summit in London, which were incredibly helpful. So the target audience for this tool is primarily impact investors. So we're talking about finance first and impact first investors who are deploying various asset classes to companies, primarily in emerging and developing country markets. And while this is targeted for investors, companies can also use the hub to identify and prioritize gender opportunities that are material to them and to evaluate and communicate their gender score to investors as well. So they can use this as a communications tool. And hopefully it's something that is deemed valuable enough by the broader sector to kind of become more of a standard, so it can also reduce duplication of companies having to fill out various tools and can be kind of a standard scorecard that can be used. So we also, in terms of thinking about how the hub was developed, we definitely reviewed and looked at all the other tools on the market that are available, and different tools such as the Women's Empowerment Principles, Gender Gap Analysis, drew inspiration from that tool. Also looked at kind of the theory and background to tools such as EDGE and EquiLeap. So looking at tools that have been used by investors for public and private markets, but again, really gearing it towards impact investors, primarily in emerging developing country markets, in DFIs, and again, really thinking about kind of the sector specific nature and kind of adding more to that nuance as well. So in terms of the nitty gritty, and again, we'll actually move into a live demo after this, but just to kind of set this up, there are a couple key resources on the hub. The first is a gender briefing. So the gender briefing is about a 500-word overview around why gender matters in that particular sector. So what are the interactions that gender has in off-grid energy or in agriculture or in one of the sectors, and what should you as an investor be thinking about related to gender in that sector. So these briefings are really ideal and helpful for kind of fund managers to think about and use, for investment officers to kind of better understand, oh, and I didn't think about that related to gender in this sector, and they just kind of tee up the topic. And then the second tool in each sector is a Gender Opportunities Explorer. This is an interactive portion of the website that allows users to click through and see what are the different opportunities that a company can use to integrate gender in a company's operations and in a supply chain, and that can add value to that company. So this is broken down, and Allie will explain this in a bit, but broken down from opportunities related to the board, to employees, to supply chain actors, to consumers, to community members, and it also has value chain specific opportunities. So it's, again, geared towards creating sector specific recommendations. The third piece is the gender scoring tool and scorecard. So this generates, it's about 35 questions per sector, and it generates a personalized gender scorecard for the target company. The scoring tool also uses skip patterns, so it can be kind of quicker to use in some scenarios, and there are also options that investors cannot answer if certain questions aren't related to their investment thesis, and it won't detract from the scorecard results. So this can be something we can help you understand to better navigate towards what your particular investment thesis is. But it will produce a more detailed scorecard, again, that Allie will show you in a minute. And then additional components on the hub are case studies that explore how some leading companies are integrating some of these gender opportunities into their operations, and what are some of the business benefits and social benefits that resulted from doing so. And then lastly, we have something that I'm extremely excited about are the gender materiality maps. So these outline where and how gender is material in the sector. We drew a lot of inspiration from the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, SASB, and their materiality maps here, but we're really targeting kind of how is gender financially material for a company. So we'll depict one of these materiality maps later, but it can help understand where action might need to be taken or should be taken or prioritized rather within a company in a particular sector based on where gender may be more material. And then we also have social impact visuals that depict kind of the causal linkages between integrating gender into different segments and what are the short, medium, and long-term outcomes that can be expected. So that's just kind of to tee up the demo here. I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Allie, who's actually going to walk you through the tools themselves. And just as a quick note, you'll all see in the Go to Webinar tab on the right-hand side, the area for questions. So as questions come up, please do type those in. And again, we'll have about 25 minutes at the end of the call to go through all of your questions. Great, Allie?
So if you had clicked on that link right there, it would take you here to our page, GenderSmart Investing Resource Hub on our website. And I'm just going to kind of click through, and feel free to follow along, the different resources that exist. So for the sake of the demo today, I'm going to focus on the off-grid energy sector. But you can see here the resources are built out, as Genevieve said, for agriculture, off-grid energy, power infrastructure, and healthcare. So I can click here. And for each sector, the main resources are first this gender briefing, which is right here on the landing page of that sector, which is really just an overview of how gender is relevant and important in that sector. And we provide some key kind of statistics or research related to business and social impacts related to integrating gender in that sector. The next piece is this Gender Opportunities Explorer. So I click here. And here, so for each sector, it shows you the different kind of roles that women can be engaged in this sector. So board, senior management and employees. For off-grid, this one is entrepreneurs and contractors, consumers and community. And then when I click on any of these, I'll start with the employees one. It shows me different opportunities for integrating gender among senior management and employees. First, we have institutional policies and practices, and then it moves down the sector-specific value chain, in this case, looking at design R&D, production and manufacturing, marketing and sales, distribution and installation, and after-sales service. And, you know, each of the opportunities are bulleted here, but we also have this key that provides kind of a shortcut to help direct you, that any opportunity that's marked with a green check mark represents opportunities that are relatively easy to implement or inexpensive. And any opportunities that have the little red flame are those that have been proven to have high impact potential. So these could help investor or company to prioritize or identify which opportunities you might want to try to implement first. I'm also going to click here just to show you kind of under the entrepreneurs and contractors, for example. So again, we have kind of institutional policies and practices, some things around recruitment. But if I click down to marketing and sales, we can see not only are there opportunities related to recruitment and sales, but also much more sector specific opportunities related to skill development, access to finance for women who are engaged in marketing and sales, gender-based violence considerations to be aware of, and other kind of operational opportunities. And so, of course, these exist for each of these kind of modes of engagement. The next resource here are the case studies. And so for each sector, we have 2 to 4 case studies currently on here, where it's a kind of company, a logo, and you can click. I won't go into it now, but you could click and see kind of the full case study that just highlights a company in this sector that has integrated a few or many different types of gender opportunities, and then also highlights the business and social impacts that have resulted, challenges they experienced, kind of nuances with their business model, lessons learned, that sort of thing. And this is an area that, as we have this tool, we hope we'll keep finding more case studies and be able to kind of put up more and more examples, because these are really great examples that help build the evidence base of how can you actually integrate gender into your operations and what are the types of impacts that companies are seeing. And then lastly, for each sector, we have the gender scoring tool. And so this tool, if we just on the kind of the landing page here, we have a few resources, scoring tool, FAQ, methodology for how the scoring tool works, and also in Excel. So the kind of purpose of this scoring tool is it allows investors to work with a company and to score them, answer a series of survey questions on various topics, and I'll kind of walk you through. And then it automatically generates a gender scorecard for that company. And so an investor could use it to score multiple companies in their portfolio to compare them. They could use it as a screening tool to identify whether or not this is a company they want to invest in, or they could use it to identify opportunities for technical assistance. So looking at where does this company already integrating gender and where is there room for improvement, and maybe these are things that they want to work on. And a company themselves could also use a scoring tool just to kind of see where they're integrating gender already, where there's things to work on, and then maybe they would want to share their scorecard with potential investors. And so, as I said, the online version, you can fill out right here, clicking the buttons in response, or you can also download the Excel form of the entire survey. And so an investor might want to download the Excel, send it to a company, have the company fill it out so they can kind of compile information and then fill in the online. Or you could just fill in the online just together. So first, there's some background questions. These are not required, just kind of general, helping us on the back end to know what types of companies we're getting data on. Then next are questions related to representation. So these are looking at representation of women throughout the company in leadership, in different, full-time, part-time staffing positions, technical roles, etc. And then because these are required, it's not going to let me click through here. I'd have to answer these questions. But if I had, the next set of questions is related to policies and practices. So what does the company have in place, and even kind of nuances of those policies and practices and the ways that they're implemented. And all of the questions up to that point are really sector agnostic. They would apply to any sector. They're standardized across. After that, we get into another set of questions that are related to the value chain. And this is where it's a really kind of deep dive, sector specific, looking at how are you integrating gender across the value chain, based on the best practices that we know from the Opportunities Explorer and additional research. How are women engaged in marketing, design, distribution, that sort of thing. So once you've filled out all of your questions, it will generate a scorecard that looks, oh no, it deleted. Okay, my scorecard deleted off of here. So I can just kind of explain it, and maybe we can pull up a slide at the end that shows what the scorecard would look like. But basically, the scorecard has 3 to 4 different sections. The first one is overall gender score, and kind of shows kind of how gender has been integrated. Let me just pull up here. Sorry. Shows how gender is integrated across those kind of modes of engagement. So board, employees, senior management, suppliers, distributors, consumers, and community members. Then there's a value chain score that shows for that specific sector how well was gender integrated within each of those value chain segments. So again, for off-grid, it would be design R&D, production and manufacturing, marketing and sales, distribution and installation, and after sales service. And then finally, there's another scorecard that really gets into that gender equity in the workplace and breaks down by the key categories of representation, leadership, recruitment and hiring, promotion and employee evaluation, pay equity, sexual harassment, flexible work and care, and skill building. And then finally, just specific to the off-grid scoring tool, there's one other score that's related to services and products. And here that score is not just looking at, does the company produce and distribute products and services that have the potential to create gender equity and specifically target female customers, but if so, is that company also integrating women in the R&D, the production, and the sales and manufacture? And so kind of really looking at, if you have the goal of reaching female customers, then how does that align with the way you've answered some of those other questions related to the integration of gender at other key points in the value chain? And I will work on kind of pulling up one of those scorecard examples while I hand it back over to Genevieve to walk you through some of the kind of interpretation of results.
Great, thanks, Allie. So sorry about not having that scorecard pulled up there. We're kind of working on that now, but also just recognizing that, you know, you can take a look and go through the questions yourself and have the scorecard pop up too. So a key point is that the concept of intersectionality. So intersectionality is related to the idea that people of kind of different identities experience multiple and overlapping forms of discrimination. So depending upon race or ethnicity, socioeconomic status, gender, etc., those people can experience overlapping forms of discrimination. And this is a very key point in kind of feminism and in gender more broadly. And so we wanted to have the option to add an intersectionality layer in the scoring tool. And right now that is an optional supplement. So if you download the Excel form at the top of the gender scoring tool page, then you're able to, in the second tab, access the intersectionality questions. And then if you fill out those questions, you can get an intersectionality score in the workplace and in the value chain. So this, again, isn't linked to the gender materiality maps, and it's not linked to the overall scorecard that is online. But for those investors that are interested, or companies that are interested in understanding kind of how they're doing related to intersectionality, this is a function that you can use. And also, I mean, we have been noticing more conversation around thinking about this concept of intersectionality and thinking about and recognizing how people of different identities experience different forms of discrimination and what are the opportunities in thinking about this concept more. So it's something that is on the horizon that can be kind of thought about and staying ahead of trends as well. I also just want to flag that on the landing page of the gender scoring tool, there's the scoring tool FAQs. Those are also designed to kind of give to fund managers, to give to investment officers that walk through what the score is about, a two-ish page document that just kind of walks through how to actually use the scoring tool and understanding and interpreting the results. So it's a really straightforward, short guide for investment officers and fund managers. The other thing that I want to flag is the concept of addressing gender-based violence being a core theme throughout the tool. This is something that's really important to us and is an important consideration from, you know, a risk and opportunities perspective as well. So the scoring tool incorporates questions on sexual harassment policies and practices to mitigate it in the workplace and a supply chain. It also includes questions around kind of women's safety that should be considered. The Gender Opportunities Explorer has questions that around actions to address gender-based violence as well in the supply chain and in the workplace. So that is kind of a core theme throughout. And as Allie mentioned, in the scorecard, one of the kind of drop-down scores is actually for sexual harassment and addressing gender-based violence. So an investor can use the score to understand, does the company have kind of the right policies and practices in place that could mitigate the risk of sexual harassment occurring, and also have the right policies and practices in place to kind of address it if it did occur. So this is kind of a signal that can be used for companies to kind of understand that risk as well. So just wanted to flag that. However, kind of workplace sexual harassment, or sex-based harassment as we often refer to it here, is a symptom of deeper power dynamics. So to really address something like sexual harassment is around creating a culture of equity, tackling root causes, both at kind of the policy level, the culture level, and also kind of individuals in the workplace. So it takes creating a gender action plan that's more holistic, as opposed to just having, policies in place that around kind of zero tolerance and things like that. Those are important, but not necessarily sufficient. If people are interested in more resources around how to create that culture of equity and address those 3 levels, definitely reach out to us. We do have more resources on that as well. And so in terms of kind of interpreting the results from the gender scorecard, so the gender scorecard, again, it results in these various scores that you will receive for the company, and really importantly is kind of links back to the materiality maps. So gender scores, if they're low in a certain area of the value chain, then we would encourage folks to look at the materiality maps to identify where is materiality considered higher, and where are their gender scores lower. And those would be areas that might want to be prioritized from a technical assistance perspective. So if you have a low score in kind of design and R&D, and yet you're a company that is specifically targeting women as consumers, in off-grid energy, and there's that materiality is higher there, then you might want to prioritize action in that particular segment of the value chain. And then additionally, so right now, we have not yet aggregated and averaged scores by sectors, but ideally over time, when we have sufficient anonymized data in the system, then we will be able to put out benchmarking reports and other types of resources so that investors and companies can understand kind of where they stand in terms of the average. So we're hoping to put out reports in terms of, in Kenya, for companies of this size, in off-grid or in agriculture, whatever sector it might be, these are the average scores by company out of a sample of, 300 companies, for example. So that will better enable an investor to kind of understand where their potential or current investees sit among the larger landscape. And then lastly, primary use of the tool currently is to allow investors to compare companies within their portfolio or potential investees, so compare them amongst each other, and to also help prioritize what are the gender opportunity areas and actions that can be taken, and how can that fit in from a technical assistance perspective. So that is kind of how you can understand and interpret the results a little bit more. If you have other questions on that, or how to understand the links, the materiality maps, go ahead and type those in. We can answer those in the Q&A section. Here's just a quick visual of the materiality map for off-grid. So it's a heat map. So you can see that the areas that are darker red are the ones that are more material to kind of have a gender lens and integrate gender considerations. And this particular materiality map, which is, again, for off-grid energy, you'll see that some of these GenderSmart domains, which are the categories on the left, have kind of sub-options as well. So if women are primary end users, or products and services may be used differently by men and women, then materiality will also differ according to that topic. So you can kind of break it down a little bit more in depth. And in terms of kind of how these materiality maps were made, going onto the website, you can see the key and some of the background on the research. We actually built out kind of full spreadsheets of all the different data in each of those boxes to inform these materiality maps. And so did quite a lot of data digging and understanding to kind of inform how these areas may be material or not. And some of the kind of lighter box areas where there may be some potential areas for materiality, And then the white boxes that don't have any of the colors are where we haven't found evidence of materiality. This is a visual of social impacts. So you can see on the left-hand side, if integrating GenderSmart strategies into kind of categories of board or for employees, for entrepreneurs or consumers, can result in, you see, these are some of the causal types of impacts that you could expect from the short term, medium term, and long term. So these kind of social impact visuals can be used to one, kind of use as arguments to say, you know, these are the types of causal linkages that we can expect, and so use it as incentive to create action for creating that social impact. Or it can be used as well to help identify if you want to track what the social impacts are, if the company or investor is interested in that, then they can build some indicators and measurements that can map to these different social impacts and track those over time as well. So it can inform some of that social impact storytelling. So the goals of ICRW in terms of enhancing the hub and the GenderSmart investing field, we are really excited about the idea and of kind of collecting the data over time from the scoring tool. Again, it would be anonymized data. If anyone is concerned about the anonymized data portion, if you don't submit the first page, so as Allie mentioned, she was kind of going through the actual scoring tool, the background on the company, those are all totally optional. And if that page is skipped, then that company won't be included as part of the anonymized data. So we won't be able to kind of have that inform any of the reports and, you know, understanding the trends. But as we kind of are able to collect that background information and do collect more data from companies using the tool, we can start to put out benchmarking reports that can help investors further understand, you know, again, and companies understand what are the averages among different sectors in certain areas of companies of different sizes, and that can help better inform, you know, understanding where the company sits and encouraging them towards different types of actions or technical assistance support. We also hope to build out the hub to include other sectors. Agriculture and off-grid energy are currently the fully built out sectors that have all of the resources that we've talked about today. Power infrastructure and healthcare are partially built out. So we're looking forward to kind of fully building those pieces out as well. And then also adding in other sectors over time to make this more of a robust resource. And then also, we are here to support companies through technical assistance as desired and needed. If anyone needs support in kind of understanding more of their scorecard results, understanding the linkages with the materiality maps, you know, we can help that with that as well. You know, again, you know, understanding where kind of materiality is higher, scores are lower, companies and investors can then look at what the gender opportunities are and the gender opportunities explorer in those particular segments in developing, you know, a customized gender action plan. But we can kind of help navigate that as well for companies and investors. But really, you know, for us at ICRW, this GenderSmart investing is an area that we really see as valuable to enhancing our mission to empower women and girls. And we hope to use our knowledge, expertise, and understanding and these resources to inform and influence financial systems in ways that promote gender equity and that are ultimately sustainable as well. So we're excited to have launched the hub and look forward to answering questions. It seems like we have a couple questions that have come in already.
Sure. So one question is about the scoring tool and the scorecard, I think. So if we're just going to take a second and we can pull up a kind of static image of the scorecard that we had in PowerPoint, and that will just give you, you know, the picture of what the scorecard will look like, an example. Sorry, I thought I had one ready to go and it wasn't quite there, so we'll grab one up now. Do you want to answer the other question, Genevieve?
Yeah, and while we're pulling that up, well, actually, it looks like Joe has just got it as well. Thank you, Joe. So real quick, here's the scorecard as Allie walked through it earlier. So as you can see, you have the overall score. So the overall score includes that draws from all of the questions in the scoring tool. So you kind of have, what the score is by the board, by employees, by suppliers and distributors, consumers, community members, and the box in the right there, that's kind of the total overall score. I would just want to flag that the community members' questions are bonus points, and that's why you'll see that there isn't a percentage there, but those influence kind of bonus points that inform the overall score. So it is possible to get over 100% in some categories, because there are some kind of above and beyond things that companies have done and can do, especially those really innovative leading companies, but that don't necessarily link to materiality for them, but we still want to kind of recognize that, so there are some bonus opportunities available. And then you can see the scores, again, broken down by value chain segment. So some of these value chain scores, maybe there's a low score in one area, but again, for this company, materiality might be higher. So again, that might be where you want to prioritize technical assistance and a gender action plan. The third category, as Allie mentioned before, being that gender equity in the workplace. So you can see, it's broken down by different categories that are important for gender in the workplace. And you have the overall gender equity in the workplace score on the right-hand side there. As I mentioned before, there's the score for sexual harassment and related to pay equity as well. So those are some investment theses focus on those components. So you can also kind of look at that explicitly if you're interested in those topics. And then this last one is related to access to services and products that impact gender equity. One thing that we're excited about this category is, we often see kind of within investment thesis, if an investment thesis is to support companies that provide access to products and services that impact gender equity, sometimes it can just be like a check the box in terms of, does this company have a product that has the potential to impact gender equity? Maybe it's an education company, maybe it has cook stoves and that it offers as part of its products. But this score is composed of, not only does the company have such a product, but does it integrate women into design of those products if women are target consumers? Does it have distribution approaches, marketing approaches, financial access approaches that actually enable those products to get into the hands of women consumers and users? So it is combined of those types of questions. Great, so moving on to the next question.
Well, actually, there's a sub piece of this question was, would you recommend going through the tool annually to see how you're improving? Which I think is a really good question. I think we had talked with some investors around, ideally, if you found this to be a really useful tool, something you might do is do the survey with companies when you start investing with them, identify areas for TA, identify things, gender opportunities. Maybe they test those out, they try to integrate those, and then a year or two later, you could do the survey again and kind of see room for improvement. So absolutely, I think that would just really be up to the company or investor if they chose to use it in that way. If anyone does choose to use it in that way, we would love for you to let us know, because I think it would be just a fabulous kind of M&E experience, and we would love to have that data and be able to analyze that to similarly be tracking change.
Right, absolutely. And any stories too around how companies integrated gender opportunities and the types of kind of financial and social impacts that can add to our kind of case study library as well. So that's really helpful if folks are interested in that. Another question we have is it possible to look at the gender materiality maps by country or region? So that's a great question. Right now, the gender materiality maps are kind of overall sector, so they aren't specific to certain countries or certain regions, but rather they're kind of an overall, this is kind of what the research says related to gender and materiality for this sector. So not specific to country or region.
Although we do, so not on the website, but for those who are interested, we do, we kind of used evidence to identify which colors we were going to use, right? So we have cataloged research and statistics and studies that led us to that kind of diagnosis of that color. And so, on a case-by-case basis, we could share some of those resources or that evidence if it related to a specific context that someone was interested in.
Mm-hmm. Another question we have here is there a certification process, or is there a complementary certification? So that's an interesting question. Right now, there is no kind of certificate that would come with receiving a certain type of score. Again, I think until we kind of build out more of the data to understand kind of what the averages are across, sectors, regions, types of companies, sizes of companies, then we'll have kind of a better idea of what, where the average is, what the standard could be, etc. And in terms of other types, there are other tools out there that provide certifications. If a certification stamp is something that someone is interested in. So, for example, Edge is a company that does certification processes. So, that could, if people are interested in exploring certifications, that is a good resource. Another question we have is, as this gender score is self-reported, do respondents need to give proof of things like a gender policy, etc.? That is a wonderful question. And in the FAQ, the scoring tool FAQ document, we actually do recommend for investment officers and fund managers to kind of confirm some of the answers to the questions by asking for certain documents, and we outline in that FAQ document what kinds of things you might want to get from a company to kind of verify their answers. But we do leave that up to the users themselves in terms, and the investment officers themselves in terms of verifying that information. So one thing that we would recommend would be, again, so for an investment officer or fund manager to kind of download that FAQ document, read that 2 to 3 pager around how to use the scoring tool, download that Excel form, send that form to the companies, and then when the company sends that Excel form back with their answers, you can ask for certain documents to kind of verify some of the answers before putting them in the scoring tool itself and generating the scorecard. So that's a great question.
There's also a question of, will there be a recording of the webinar? And the answer to that is yes. We have been recording it, and we will be sending a YouTube link out by email after the webinar, and also on our social media platforms.
Great. So does anyone have any further questions? We'll kind of give a couple minutes for folks to type in. If people, is there a way that people can speak up as well if they aren't able to see the chat function?
Yeah, I think if you actually, this is Joe. Sorry, I work with Genevieve and Allie. If you want, we can try to take you off mute. If you have a separate question, I think most of them have, let's see. It's easier to answer if you type it in, but we can try to respond to you if you have any specific questions.
Does that person have their hand raised?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we see a question from Cecilia. And Cecilia, if you could unmute yourself, then you can go ahead and ask that question as well.
Hello. Hello.
Hi. Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. Oh, well, not really a question, but I would really like to congratulate ICRW for this very good work. I'm working and living in Kenya, and this concept of investing with a gender lens is really something that we need to look into. There is a growing sector that is doing impact investments, and one of the gaps that we have here is technical assistance in this respect, looking at how investments are responding to both social and environmental issues. So this resource is really, really useful. I would recommend it to other people too, and I hope that we can continue interacting and getting to know how these tools are being used elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia, for those kind words. We really appreciate that. And sorry, folks, if the volume was low on that. But yes, or not. But yeah, we really appreciate that. It's definitely been a work in progress, and we have been excited to share it as well. And we really hope that it's something that can be useful for investors and for companies. So again, and we really do appreciate people's feedback. So any kind of information that you have around the use of the tool or any questions that you have, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. One other question is related to kind of what what do we hope to achieve in terms of collecting the data and whatnot. So in terms of collecting the data, this is something that we hope to do kind of over time, and we also hope to keep the resource hub updated over time as well. So we recognize that the resource needs to stay relevant, and in order to stay relevant, it needs to be continually updated. So that is definitely something on our minds as well, and we'll be continuing to kind of receive feedback from folks, making sure that the tools are relevant, adding to kind of the data and the materiality maps over time, hopefully adding more in terms of case studies as well, and really, having this be something that can continue to develop as the sector also continues to develop. And again, having those kind of reports and benchmarking and anonymized data that we collect to inform those as well.
And one point I wanted to make, just to Cecilia's comment about sharing it, hopefully this was, very obvious in the presentation, but all these resources are completely open sourced. So, you can use them among your teams, you can share them. Everything is available to the public, and as Genevieve mentioned, then on the back end, the data is all anonymized. So we do hope to do some analyses and benchmarking, but it is anonymized, so there should be no worries there. And if people want to follow up for more TA and more analysis and more kind of in-depth understanding of results and that sort of thing, please reach out, and we're happy to do that.
Great. Well, I think those are all the questions that we've had. So we'll go ahead and close the webinar a little early here. Thank you again so much for joining today. We'll be recording this webinar and sending it out. If you have other questions on using the tool, understanding the tool, definitely reach out. If you have other feedback as well, we'd really appreciate it. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.